So Dragon Age The Veilguard is a highly anticipated RPG coming out next month, and there's been a lot of public discourse surrounding this game. Most of it is a bunch of culture war shit that I really have no interest in discussing, like the ass slider not being big enough, not being able to have a big enough ass for your character, the game being quote-unquote woke because it has gay romances, and also the top surgery scars, which is something that you can decide you don't want and turn it off. You don't even have to turn it off. It's something that you turn on. It's not on by default. So the whole... it's frustrating because most of the discussions that people are having surrounding this game is not actually about the gameplay itself. I saw the 20-minute reaction video that Asmongold did for the gameplay, and all he said was that the game doesn't look good. It's woke. A word that has completely lost its meaning if it ever had any in the first place. But I actually saw the gameplay, and I saw in-depth videos about the character creator, and, of course, this image right here is one that a lot of people are jumping on about that ugly character. It's like, yeah, it's a character creator. You can make ugly characters, but if you've seen multiple videos from multiple different channels that had early access to the game and were able to play it, it's a very deep and intricate character creator system where it's not like Mass Effect Andromeda where just everyone looks ugly. This is actually like a really good system where, yeah, you can make an ugly character if you want, like you can in other RPGs like Fallout 4 and Cyberpunk. Like, you can make just like a fucking abomination of a character, and that's what that character in particular is. That's what it is. That's what it's all about. But people are like, oh, this is example of woke because it's an ugly character that you can make in a character creator system. Like, what the fuck are you guys even talking about? Like, have you guys ever played a game with a character creator before? Like, are you fucking serious? But they just say anything to fit their political agenda, and they don't actually care about video games. They just want to push their right-wing bullshit. And hey, I'm gonna say, I'm voting for Donald Trump. I am, I'm not trying to talk about, politics and bring that shit into my channel, but I'm just saying I'm not, a complete left-wing, liberal, Democrat, whatever you want to call me, because I am, the furthest thing from that you could possibly imagine. Because if you guys are familiar with my political work on YouTube, my political channel, and you actually are familiar with a lot of my takes, I don't agree with most of what Democrats have to say, but at the same time, just because I'm not, I don't believe in this left-wing ideology doesn't mean that every fucking thing on the face of the earth has to be woke and has to be, just some kind of left-wing propaganda, let's fucking relax, guys, please. It's just a game. That being said, there are things that I am very concerned about with this game. The gameplay itself looks really good, looks polished, and the overall, the graphics, the detail, everything looks solid, and it looks like they actually took the time that they needed to make it right, to make it a really good game. Because really, BioWare their survival is contingent on this game being successful. After everything they've been through with, those two giant failures with Andromeda and Anthem, if this game is also a flop, I can't imagine that bodes well for the future of the studio and also Mass Effect 4, because that's the next game that they're going to be making. So, I want to be optimistic about this game, and I see a lot of good things, but then I also see some things that are not so good. But it's nothing that anyone is actually talking about, because it's people who aren't actually fans of the Dragon Age series. These are mostly outsiders who, again, if you look at their channel, if you look at their videos, if you look what they're all about, it's they talk more about political culture war stuff than they do about the actual video games that they're playing or that they're talking about. It's really a political channel masquerading as a video game commentary channel. That is sadly most of what you see these days. You don't actually hear any substance about the actual gameplay and the actual game itself. Well, as someone who has spent hundreds of hours on the Dragon Age series, between all three games, between Origins, Dragon Age 2, and Dragon Age Inquisition. Origins is by far my favorite of all of them, and actually recently replayed Origins and had a lot of fun with that, and I had that on my Let's Play channel, or I don't have it uploaded yet, but I have all the videos uploaded and scheduled, waiting to post them at the right time. It's like it was a really fun playthrough. It was really fun to get back into that. And then I'm also in the middle of my Dragon Age 2 playthrough currently, and the whole idea is that I'm replaying through the entire series to kind of prepare for the Veilguard, because it's a game that I was really excited for and was really hoping would be great. I'm not so sure now, after what has just come out in recent days surrounding the choices that you make and how they import into the new game. So the choices, like, if you're familiar with BioWare games, that has always been like the fundamental aspect of the Mass Effect series and the Dragon Age series, is that your choices have an effect on the outcome, and it has an effect on the story, even though it's like mostly a minimal effect. I mean, in Mass Effect, I'd say it's a little bit more important, but not really, because there's a lot of times where a character's dead and they just get like swapped or replaced by a different one, and the same quest plays out the exact same way for the most part, and the endings are the same regardless of the choices you made in other games. So it's not really like, oh my god, you're fundamentally changing the world by making certain choices, but it's like, yeah, I mean, a lot of the time, like a character from Mass Effect 1 that you spared or killed or whatever, like, or some action that you took back that, like, that is mentioned at the very least in Mass Effect 3. Like, the choices have always been a key component of the BioWare experience. Nobody can deny that, right? And even with Dragon Age and going from Dragon Age Origins to Dragon Age 2, a lot of stuff. There were even unique quests that you only got in Dragon Age 2 based off of choices you made in Dragon Age Origins. And a lot of the stuff, had some weight on the experience for Dragon Age 2 because a lot of it was referenced and mentioned. And same thing with Dragon Age Inquisition. They had an entire system called the Dragon Age Keep that allows you to import choices from Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2. And there were characters and there were things that showed up based off of the choices you made in those other two games. So you would think, with Veilguard being perhaps the most direct sequel to any other Dragon Age game that we've ever had, it's pretty much Inquisition Part 2, because the events of Dragon Age Inquisition tie directly into the main conflict and setting and everything going on in the Veilguard. Solus, who was a very important character in Inquisition, turns bad guy at the end of that game, and is, obviously plays a key part in Veilguard, because a lot of the shit that he did led to what happened. Literally, he caused the apocalyptic events that take place in the Veilguard. So, to say that Inquisition is disconnected in any way from they tie directly into each other more than any other two games in the entire series. And obviously, you can create your Inquisitor character. When you do the character creation for your main character, you also are able to do your created character from Inquisition in the new Veilguard game. And this is where the panic start to set in the community, because it appears, based off of people's early test and early play of the game, this is all you get. 3 choices. You only get 3 choices that you get to implement into your game, into the Veilguard. And there's a lot of stuff that's missing here. There's the Well of Sorrows, which is a huge thing, considering the fact that Morgan, who was a main character from Dragon Age Origins and had a key part in Inquisition as well, she was like one of the featured characters in the trailer for the Veilguard. There's a very important choice that you make regarding Morgan in Inquisition, of course referencing the Well of Sorrows. If you are familiar with that, and if you've played Inquisition, you know what I'm talking about. And apparently that's not a choice that is an option for you to carry over into the Veilguard. And also, obviously, Morgan was a very important character in Origins, and you can choose whether or not to be in a relationship with her, your Grey Warden character from the first game, and also to have a child with her. None of that, absolutely none of that carries over, which is insane, because they have Morgan return in this game for nostalgia bait to appeal to the older fan base, while not having anything that you ever did with that character mean anything in the new game. And I'm just wondering how the dialogue is going to play out because it won't be able to reference literally anything that she's ever done in any of their games because the choices aren't affected. Like, what? And that's just scratching the surface. There's a whole bunch of different important choices that you've made in previous games that you would think logically would have some kind of impact on the story they're telling in the Veilguard. An example is the Grey Wardens. They play a huge part in this new game. But the choice you made surrounding the Grey Wardens in Inquisition was a pretty big one, whether you chose to allow them to help or to exile them. Like, you would think that's a pretty big deal, considering that that the Wardens are a very important part of Veilguard, and also certain Warden characters that survived in Origins and are in Inquisition, like, they're not there either because it's dependent on your choice. And since the choices aren't in there at all, then it's not there. It's just absolutely insane to me that they thought this was acceptable, to only have 3 choices from all 3 games. So it's 3 choices total. All 3 of them were for Inquisition, but 2 of them were, like, decisions you made at the very end of the game. Not the very end of the game, at the end of the DLC for the game, which takes place like a year or 2 after the main storyline. But that's just insane to me. So, no choices from Origins. No choices from Dragon Age 2. Those games pretty much didn't happen. It really, like, they called it an optional DLC, but it really wasn't. If you played Inquisition, like, the Trespassers DLC was a must-have experience, because then you would have no idea what the fuck is even going on in the Veilguard, and why everything that's happening in the game is actually happening. So the only choice from the base game that you can implement from Inquisition to Veilguard is which character you decided to romance. Out of all the different choices that had serious implications in the story, only 3 of them carry over. And based off this article that I'm going to link in the description, which is actually where the source of this image comes from, that shows how little choices that you actually get to import from other games, and it's actually just Inquisition. This article says that it's only these choices. There's no Dragon Age Origins and no Dragon Age 2. Your choices in the first 2 games have no effect on anything that happens in the Veilguard, which some people may attribute to, well, it takes place in the north of Thedas in Tevinter, which is far away from Orlais and Ferelden, which is in the south. Except if you look at the map, and if you look at the setting of the game, it doesn't just take place in Tevinter. It takes place in Ravain, it takes place in Antiva, the Anderfels, and Navarra, which are countries that practically border Orlais and Ferelden, which were the locations of the first 2 games. Well, actually the first 3 games, because Orlais was the main setting of Inquisition. Ferelden was too. And the main setting of Dragon Age 2 was a city called Kirkwall, which was in the Free Marches. So the idea that the locations for the first 3 games were just so far geographically disconnected from the 5 other countries that you can play in the Veilguard, I'm gonna call bullshit on that. There is, like, people are just trying to come up with some reason to explain this shit because they love the franchise so much, they love BioWare so much, that they're gonna defend anything they do, no matter what. But fuck that. This was clearly lazy, negligent, whatever you want to call it, the fact that your choices do not import, when that has literally been the entire point of Dragon Age. This is clearly just them being lazy, and them not, they just can't be bothered. That's what it is. And also, like I said, this is literally Inquisition Part 2. This is a direct tie-in. It immediately follows what happened in the last game. And a lot of returning characters, too. I mentioned the huge problem with bringing Morrigan back by not having any of the choices import. Like, these choices definitely had a huge effect on her character. Whether or not she became a mother, whether or not she entered a relationship with the main character from the first game. Like, this is shit that fucking matters, right? But none of it's going to be referenced. Varric is another character that returned from Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition. So none of the shit you did with him in Inquisition matters. None of the choices you made with him matters in that game. And also Dragon Age 2. He was like the secondary protagonist of Dragon Age 2. So it's weird that he's like this huge, like, he was like the main character that was featured in the original trailer. And the fact that you're going to be talking to him and he won't be able to reference anything that he's ever done in the past because a lot of it was dependent on your choices. Like, for example, Hawke, the main character from Dragon Age 2, whether or not he or she even is a he or she in the first place, because even that's not a choice that you can have in the Veilguard that will be referenced. So that's obviously a problem. And also, like, certain things you did with Varric in that game, and whether or not Hawke eventually lived or died. Like, these are important things that would shape the character we know as Varric in a lot of different ways, but he's just going to be a shell of himself, just not mentioning anything. So it just creates awkward dialogue, and it just feels so far disconnected from the other games, despite being part of the Dragon Age series. I can forgive this a lot more with their other game that's coming up, Mass Effect 4, because it takes place like 500, 600 years or something like that after the ending of Mass Effect 3. And we get that because in the trailer that showed Liara, who was like a very, very old woman. But if you're familiar with Mass Effect, the Asari lived for like 1,000 years, and she was only like 100 years old in the in the original trilogy. So yeah, it's like a 500, 600 year jump in time. So okay, if it's like hundreds of years after, then I'm a little bit more forgiving as far as things not being referenced, because very few, if any, characters will still be alive from that point in the timeline. But we're talking about 10 years after Inquisition. This is 10 years. Not 50 years or 100 years. 10. And like I said, they're bringing in a bunch of characters from the old games, but they're just, they didn't exist. The other games didn't exist, guys. Just move on and play this new game and just go fuck yourself, I guess. They really don't give a fuck about the community. Like, this really is a big fuck you. It's just like, yeah, everything you've done over the past 15 years means absolutely nothing, and it doesn't mean shit. So, that's just great. Like, it really is a slap to the face. Waited 10 fucking years for this bullshit. And I'll be 100% honest, this was the first game that I have pre-ordered in, like, about 10 years. I actually remember the last game that I ever pre-ordered. It was Infinite Warfare, of all games, in 2016. The reason why I pre-ordered it wasn't even necessarily that I was looking forward to Infinite Warfare and I thought it was going to be such a great, epic Call of Duty game. I did it because I was like, okay, I buy the Call of Duty games every single year, and it's kind of like a tradition for me, but I really, like, wasn't feeling Infinite Warfare. Like, remember back then, the trailer for that game was, like, the most disliked video in all of YouTube history, and I wasn't feeling it either. But they gave me a good deal that I couldn't refuse. It was the deluxe edition to pre-order for $100, which I think is still to this day the most I ever spent on a single video game purchase. Not counting, you know, when I was like 15 years old and I spent all my savings, all my money on Grand Theft Auto Online shark cards, but that's a different story for another day. But yeah, I never spent like more than $60 on a game ever, like to initially buy it, but this was $100 for the base game, the season pass, so all the DLC, and Modern Warfare Remastered. I'm like, well, I guess that's a deal I can't refuse, because if you buy them all individually, it would be like $150. So I'm saving a good amount there. So yeah, that was the last game I ever pre-ordered, but I pre-ordered Dragon Age The Veilguard, actually. I don't pre-order games, you know, I advocate against doing it, but I believed in this game so much, I believed that this game would be great, and it looks like a lot of detail and a lot of hard work was put into this game. But if you're just gonna, like, insult the fan base like that, I can't support it. I'm canceling my pre-order right now. This, to me, is straight up unacceptable. And it makes sense that you specifically, like, the people who went to the event that they did, the early playtest, there were people like Luke Stevens and a lot of haters of Dragon Age at the Veilguard who were, like, very negative about the initial trailer, very negative about the entire game. They were invited to playtest the game, and they all said they were fucking blown away. That made me be like, holy shit, this game is really going to be something. But Luke Stevens is also someone who, admittedly, is not a Dragon Age fan. He's not someone who really knows a whole lot about the series, who really understands any of it. So he is a newcomer, basically. So his opinion is going to be a lot different than someone who's been playing the series for 15 years since its inception and see shit like this. That is just, again, a slap in the face. A kick in the balls to the hardcore fan base that is really the reason why this game exists, if you think about it. Because if no one cared about Dragon Age anymore, then there'd be no point in making a game, even though it's been 10 plus years. But that's also the thing, like, the most people who even care about this are people who played Inquisition 10 years ago, played Origins 15 years ago, and were like, we want another game. They're trying to appeal to new players, and that, that's fine. And I'm wondering if that has to do with the choices not being as vast as they should be, in a way to not confuse the new players and give them, overload them with too much information, like make them pick all these different choices. But it's like with every other BioWare game, though, if you don't want to import the choices, you could set a default world state, like you can in every other Mass Effect game and every other Dragon Age game. But this German website was not supposed to talk about the choices. That was one thing that they were all specifically told not to talk about. There was like an embargo placed on every single person who was able to playtest the game to specifically not talk about the choices and how they import into the Veilguard. And the reason why is not to avoid spoilers, because it doesn't make any sense, because you're just importing choices that you already made in old games. So to avoid spoilers or whatever wouldn't make no sense. It's because they half-assed it and didn't fucking do the fans justice in this case, and they don't want to piss people off and have any more bad PR than this game already has, so they want to keep it hush-hush and sweep it under the rug and, not let people discuss it and talk about it. So that's why you don't see any videos about the choices specifically. This German outlet definitely wasn't supposed to leak this shit out. No other publication has this. And, it's okay for me to put it out there because I didn't sign no fucking agreement. I didn't play test it. I didn't do any of that. So I'm not under any trouble for saying this shit. So it's like, I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned. They really, BioWare still exists. It is on life support, but still exists based off the very little goodwill it has left from its hardcore fan base. And to just do things like this that just shits on them is very puzzling to me. And I don't understand why this decision was made. Was it a cost-cutting measure? Did it feel like it cost too much money to have all these branching paths, development and coding and all that stuff? It takes a lot more effort than just having a streamlined experience for everybody and no variation, because these little different, these three choices don't really, mean as much as having 10 choices from each game. That's obviously, that's 10 times the workload if you think about it. So they weren't going to do that. But I don't really give a shit what the reason was. If it was a pragmatic reason when it comes to development, the costs were already, getting really high, so they had to cut the costs. Bro, I've waited 10 years for this shit. I am not going to, just be okay, even if it didn't take 10 years for them to make the game. The fact that I waited 10 years, the longer I'm waiting for these games to come out, and games are taking longer and longer to come out, but the longer it takes, the higher my expectations are. By a lot. Compared to a game that took 2 years to make, or 1 year to make in the case of a Call of Duty game. But, the thing with COD is that, yeah, it fucking sucks, but they release a game every year, so it's take it or leave it, right? And I'm not really a big Call of Duty person anymore, but I can accept it more if the game is mid and lacks a lot of features that the players want, compared to if they waited 10 years between Call of Duty entries and it turned out to be mid. You know what I'm saying? Time is it's a very important aspect here that is going to weigh a lot in people's opinions. So I am very disappointed, to say the least, because this was the thing that I was looking forward to the most, is seeing, every decision I've made in all the other games kind of, come into play in the new game. And to see, what's happened to my favorite characters and, what these choices, what impact they've made in 10, 20 years. Because King Alistair was, I loved Alistair. He was a great character. Now, I don't have no idea. We'll never find out what happened to him after all these years. We'll never find out what happened to a whole bunch of other characters. Who is the Divine? One of the choices is disband the Inquisition or keep it together. If you decide to keep it, you are literally under the direction of the Divine. But you can't choose who the Divine actually is. Well, the choice that you made for that does not have an effect. So it's just very weird, very convoluted shit right here that absolutely hurts the quality and any hype that I ever had for this game. It's all dead now. I mean, I had a whole playthrough, like a whole run of the entire trilogy planned, or of the entire series leading up to the Veilguard, and now I don't want to play Veilguard anymore. Well, I'm not going to play Veilguard. I canceled the pre-order, but I was going to play Inquisition, not going to play it anymore. Maybe, I guess, since I already, like, I'm already, like, halfway through Dragon Age 2, I'm going to eventually finish that Let's Play, because I have, like, Let's Play videos for that. So it's kind of something I have to finish at some point now, because it's on YouTube and shit, but I could tell you I'm probably never going to play the games ever again, if the choices don't matter. That kills any replay value that the old games have now. Like, I spent a great deal of time thinking about the different world state combinations and how they can play into Veilguard, and how, you know, the choices I make in Veilguard can, like, mix in with that, and then do it all over again, and experience it all over again, but in a different way, and making different choices. Now, the choices aren't there anymore, so what's the fucking point? What's the point of playing Dragon Age ever again? That's the question I'm asking myself now. Yes, the gameplay is fun. Yes, like, the world building and everything, and just the atmosphere of the game. But the choices, it's the DNA of Dragon Age. It's the DNA of BioWare. Taking that away, it's just like any other generic game now. And I'm just not going to be invested in this series anymore. I'm not going to. It's pretty much dead to me. Just, like, there's so many great game series that I loved back in the day, but over time the developers killed it and destroyed it. Like, Saints Row is, like, the great example of that for me. That was one of my favorite game series of all time, and they just fucking killed it. So obviously I don't care about anything they do with that anymore, if they even do anything at this point. And there's just so many other ones, but I'm just like, you know what? Cut my losses, move on. There's so many other great games to play, so many other great game franchises that I still have never experienced before, that, I could just more effectively, spend my time doing that than harping on the death of one of my favorite game series, which would be Dragon Age. Even though I'm making this video, I don't plan on making any more videos about it, unless they decide to somehow make this right. I don't even know how they can anymore, because the development's already in. The game's coming out next month. So unless they try to do, like, a Cyberpunk type situation, but I don't think so, because the backlash doesn't seem really that much. I don't hear anything about this, really, like, from any major publications. I looked up news articles about this, about the choices, and how you don't really get to make any in this new game. Don't see any articles, except for the German article that I just mentioned. That was, like, the source of this entire news to begin with. And I'm not seeing any YouTube videos either. Every time I look up I tried looking up videos about the Veilguard, I don't see anything about this topic specifically. All I hear about is the ass slider is too small, and it's woke and all this shit. Like, that's all the discourse that this game has. And it's like, I'm really angry about this game, and I am disappointed, and I cannot support it, but at the same time, like, these fucking people that, like, most of the people who are negative towards it, they're negative for the wrong reasons, so I don't want to, stand with them either. So I'm kind of, like, in this weird place where I kind of want to defend the stupid criticisms from it, but I have my own reasons for not supporting it, and I'm not going to play it, so I'm just gonna pretend that it doesn't exist anymore, which is fitting because BioWare has pretended like we don't exist and we don't matter. As classic Dragon Age fans, we don't matter. We don't mean anything to them. They've clearly demonstrated that by taking this action. So I will be boycotting this game. I guess lesson learned as far as pre-orders are concerned. Good thing I learned it quick before the game came out and everything, so I didn't lose any money. I'm glad this information got out there, and it's like, yeah, you pre-ordered, like, your first game ever in, like, almost 10 years, and you were really excited for this brand new AAA experience, this new game. It's like, yep, just stick with the old games like you have been for the past, like, 10 years, and don't buy anything new, and just stick with what you've been doing, because, yeah, that's the best way to do it. These new games and, the shit that these developers have been doing in recent years is just, you can't support it. It's awful. And obviously BioWare's no exception to that. I mean, they're part of EA, so that alone I should have known, because EA is EA. But I just wrongfully assumed in my ignorance that they were going to actually do right by the fans and make a really great game. But yeah, it is what it is. And I'm actually now seeing an IGN article that confirms all of this. So it's not just rumor and speculation anymore. This is what this game's going to be. And I didn't even mention this, I even bought the deluxe edition because I believed in it so much and I want to support BioWare. I wanted BioWare to succeed and do great and be back to its former glory. But since they have no interest in actually satisfying their fans and satisfying the people who made them what they are, or at least what they were, then yeah, I just can't. I'm not gonna just blindly sit there and support them. Like, I have better things and better things to spend with my money and better things to do with my time. So, yeah, Dragon Age is cooked. Time to move on to something else.